My dad left my brother the entire inheritance from Grandpa. Then a stranger handed me an envelope that turned my whole world upside down. Hi, my name is Malaya Johnson. I'm in my mid-20s, and this is one of the hardest things I've ever shared. Please listen to the end, and if my story connects with you, I'd be so grateful if you could support our channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing with someone who might need to hear it. I've always been the quiet one in my family. Growing up, it felt like my brother Tobias was the sun, and I was just some shadow stuck in the corner. He was the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong, the one my dad bragged about to everyone at church or at barbecues. Meanwhile, I was the daughter who blended into the background, who people forgot was even in the room. The only person who made me feel different was my grandpa Harold. He saw me in ways no one else did. He'd ask about my drawings, tell me my thoughts mattered, and remind me that quiet didn't mean weak. He once promised me, looking straight into my eyes, that he'd make sure I was okay when he was gone. Those words stayed with me. So when Grandpa passed, I held on to that promise. I didn't expect millions, but I thought maybe I'd get something small, maybe his old watch, or one of the books we used to read together. Something to remind me that he meant what he said. The day of the will reading, I sat there nervous, holding my breath, waiting. The lawyer listed everything, the house, the savings, the land. And all of it, every last bit, went to Tobias. When he finished, he barely even glanced my way. Nothing for me. Not even a keepsake. I couldn't even move at first. It felt like the ground slipped under me. I looked over at my dad, waiting for him to say something, to notice how unfair it was. But he just shrugged like it didn't matter and said, "Your brother will take care of you." Those words stung more than the silence in the room. Like I wasn't capable of standing on my own. Like my only worth was in being attached to Tobias. Meanwhile, my brother sat there grinning, soaking in the spotlight, already talking about what he was going to do with the money and the land. No one looked at me. No one asked how I felt. In that moment, I felt invisible. Betrayed. Like the people who should have cared about me most had decided I didn't matter at all. And as much as I tried to swallow it down, deep inside, something cracked open. Something that wouldn't stay silent forever. I kept hearing Grandpa's voice in my head. That one moment years ago when he put his hand on mine and told me, "I'll make sure you're okay when I'm gone." It used to comfort me. It used to make me feel safe, like no matter how small or invisible I felt in the house, at least one person cared. But after the will reading, those words twisted inside me like a knife. Had he forgotten? Or did my dad and brother twist things so badly that even Grandpa's promise couldn't reach me? Meanwhile, Tobias couldn't stop rubbing it in. He strutted around like he had built the fortune himself. At every family gathering, every phone call, every post online, he bragged. "I just closed the deal on Grandpa's land," he said one night at dinner, his voice full of pride. "Made a huge profit already. That money's going to open doors for me." He smiled like he was the smartest man alive, like Grandpa's life work had been handed to the right one. And my dad? He ate it up. He leaned back in his chair, grinning from ear to ear, and said, "That's my boy. You're the future of this family, Tobias. Just like I always knew you would be." He said it without hesitation, without even glancing at me. Like I wasn't sitting there at the same table. Like I didn't even exist. My mom, Janine, sat there too. She didn't say much. She pushed food around on her plate and avoided looking at me. Sometimes her eyes flickered like she wanted to speak, like she wanted to defend me, but the words never came. She stayed quiet, shrinking into herself. Her silence was almost worse than Dad's favoritism, because at least he made it clear where he stood. Mom's quietness felt like betrayal wearing a softer face. I sat there feeling smaller and smaller. Each word Tobias threw around, each time Dad called him the man of the family, it was like another door slammed shut on me. I wanted to scream, to ask why I was always treated like I didn't matter. But instead, I kept my mouth shut. I chewed my food, stared at my plate, and pretended I didn't care. Inside, though, the anger burned. I remembered Grandpa's promise, and I couldn't shake the thought that maybe he tried, maybe something happened that I didn't know about. Or maybe everyone had just agreed that I was disposable. So I started pulling back. I stopped answering family calls right away. I skipped a few dinners. I worked extra shifts at my part-time job, so I had an excuse not to be home. But distance didn't ease the sting. It only gave the anger more room to grow. I felt crushed, written off completely, like my story had ended before it began. But a small part of me refused to accept that. I couldn't forgive them, not this time. And even if I didn't know it yet, That wound was going to change everything. It was a few weeks after the will reading, and life felt heavier than ever. I'd been burying myself in my part-time job, trying to avoid family dinners and conversations that left me feeling like I didn't belong. That night, I was walking home, the streetlights flickering above me, when I noticed a man standing at the corner of the block. At first, I thought he was just another stranger passing by, but when our eyes met, he stepped toward me carefully, almost hesitant, like he didn't want to scare me. He was dressed neatly, not overdressed, but with the kind of polish that told me he wasn't just wandering around. His voice was calm but serious when he spoke. "Are you Malaya Johnson?" I froze. Something about the way he said my name made me tighten my grip on my bag. "Yeah," I said cautiously, ready to walk faster if I had to. He nodded, almost like he was relieved. "My name is Elias Ward. I'm a lawyer." "A lawyer?" My stomach dropped. I immediately thought of my dad or Tobias. Maybe they'd sent him to talk to me, maybe to shut me out even further. Before I could even ask, he reached into his coat and pulled out a plain white envelope. He held it out, not forcing it into my hands, but waiting for me to take it. "Your grandfather wanted you to have this," he said, his tone lower now, like it was meant only for me. "And please don't tell your father I gave it to you." For a moment, I just stared at the envelope. My chest tightened. "Grandpa? After everything that happened, after being left with nothing, why would someone suddenly hand me something in his name?" My mind raced. Could this be real, or was it some kind of cruel joke? "Why me?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Elias shook his head. "I can't say more. Just know this came directly from him, and he wanted it kept private." I hesitated, but something in his eyes seemed steady, almost protective. Slowly, I reached out and took the envelope from his hand. It felt heavier than I expected, like whatever was inside carried weight far beyond paper. By the time I looked up again, Elias had already stepped back. "Take care of yourself, Miss Johnson," he said, then turned and walked down the street, disappearing into the night like he had only come for this single purpose. I stood there frozen under the streetlight, clutching the envelope so tightly my knuckles ached. My heart was pounding loud in my ears. Could it really be from Grandpa? Could he have left me something after all, even if the will said otherwise? I walked the rest of the way home with the envelope pressed against my chest. Every step felt heavier, every thought louder. I didn't know if it was hope or fear, but one thing was certain. Whatever was inside could change everything. I sat on the edge of my bed with the envelope resting in my lap. For a long moment, I just stared at it, afraid to open it. My fingers shook as I slid them under the flap, half expecting to find nothing but blank paper inside. But when I pulled it out, I froze. It was a letter, written in Grandpa Harold's familiar, steady handwriting. The sight of it alone made my chest tighten. I unfolded the paper carefully, the faint smell of his old cologne still clinging to it. My eyes moved across the words, and it felt like his voice was in the room with me. "Malaya, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I want you to know something important. I love you, and I have always believed in you. I did not trust your father or Tobias with certain things. They don't understand the value of what I've built. They'd waste it without a second thought. That's why I chose to leave this for you." I stopped reading for a second, covering my mouth as tears blurred my vision. My heart hurt, but at the same time, I felt this strange warmth. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't broken his promise. The letter continued. "Inside this envelope, you'll find a key. It belongs to a safety deposit box at the local bank. I've left instructions there, and what's inside is meant only for you. Malaya, you were always the one with quiet strength. You didn't need to be the loudest in the room, and that's what made you powerful in ways no one else saw. This is for you, to protect you, and to remind you of your worth." By the time I reached the end, my hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the paper. Tears streamed down my face. All my life, I'd been overlooked, treated like background noise. But here it was, proof that Grandpa had seen me. He knew my worth even when no one else did. I pulled the small brass key from the bottom of the envelope, holding it up against the light. It was real, solid, and it suddenly felt like a doorway had opened in front of me. Questions raced through my head. What could possibly be in that box? Why had he kept it hidden? Why hadn't he trusted Dad or Tobias? But beneath the swirl of confusion, one thing settled deep in my chest. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. I felt chosen. I pressed the letter to my chest, sobbing quietly in the dark. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured the safety deposit box and the mystery waiting inside. By morning, my mind was made up. Whatever secrets Grandpa had left, I was going to find them. The very next day, I would walk into that bank with the key in my hand. The next morning, I walked into the small local bank with the key clutched tightly in my palm. My heart was pounding so loudly it felt like the whole lobby could hear it. I'd never even set foot in this branch before, but I followed Grandpa's letter exactly, going straight to the clerk and quietly asking about the safety deposit box. The banker, an older woman with kind eyes, checked my ID and compared it with the papers on file. After a moment, she gave me a nod. "Right this way, Miss Johnson," she said, leading me down a quiet hallway. We stopped at a locked door, and I handed her the key. She unlocked the box and slid it forward onto the table. It wasn't very big, but just looking at it made my hands tremble. For a second, I hesitated, wondering if I was even ready to see what was inside. Then I took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Inside was more than I could have ever imagined. On top sat a neat stack of documents, clipped together. As I pulled them out, my eyes widened. They were property records, deeds showing that Grandpa still owned a piece of land, a large one, that Tobias didn't even know existed. My breath caught. So Tobias had bragged about owning everything, but here was proof he didn't. Beneath the deeds were old letters and journals, bound with string. I opened one carefully and skimmed the faded pages. My stomach turned as I read notes about my father, Charles. Deals that weren't legal. Payments that had been covered up. Entries where Grandpa wrote about how he didn't trust my dad to run things, how he feared Tobias was just like him. It was like peeking behind a curtain into truths I was never supposed to see. And then I saw it, a thick envelope with my name written in Grandpa's handwriting. I opened it slowly and nearly gasped. Inside was a set of bank papers, showing a large sum of money deposited into an account under my name. The kind of money that could change my life completely. For a moment, I just stared, unable to breathe. The banker, standing nearby, gave me a small smile. "All of this is legally yours, Miss Johnson. It's been here for years, waiting for you." Tears burned in my eyes as I looked back at the pile in front of me. The land. The journals. The money. Grandpa hadn't just left me something sentimental. He had left me power, proof, protection, things that my father and brother never thought I'd have. I gathered the contents carefully, my hands shaking but my heart beating with a new kind of strength. Grandpa had given me more than an inheritance, he had given me leverage. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just standing in my brother's shadow anymore. I finally had something that was mine, and it changed everything. I stayed quiet for a while after discovering what Grandpa left me. The land, the money, the journals, they were mine, and for the first time, I finally felt like I mattered. But I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. I carried the secret like armor, waiting for the right moment. That moment came one Sunday at dinner. We were all at the table, the smell of roast chicken filling the room. Tobias was in his usual mood, loud, proud, and talking about himself. He leaned back in his chair, smirking as he went on and on about how he was going to expand the family wealth. "I've been thinking about investing some of Grandpa's money into real estate," Tobias said, his voice full of arrogance. "That way, the Johnson name keeps growing. I mean, I'm basically the one carrying the family now." Dad chuckled, nodding with approval. "That's my boy. You're thinking like a real man. Just like I taught you." I sat there listening, the words rolling over me, but this time, instead of shrinking, I felt a fire rise in my chest. I set my fork down quietly and looked across the table. My voice was calm, almost too calm when I spoke. "Funny," I said, meeting Tobias's eyes. "Grandpa didn't leave you everything after all." The room went silent for a moment. Tobias blinked at me, then burst out laughing. "What are you talking about, Malaya? You didn't get anything. Everybody knows that." Dad joined in, shaking his head. "Don't start with nonsense. You saw the will." But I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and slid it onto the table. It was the deed, proof of the land Tobias had no clue about. The laughter stopped instantly. Tobias's grin faded as he picked it up, scanning the paper with confusion. What is this?" Dad leaned over his shoulder, his face turning red as the words sank in. His voice rose, sharp and angry. "Where did you get this? How do you have this?" I kept my face steady, even though my heart was racing inside. "Grandpa trusted me more than you think," I said simply. For a second, no one moved. The air was so thick with tension it was hard to breathe. Tobias looked lost, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to process it. Dad, though, he slammed his hand on the table, furious, demanding answers. But I gave them nothing more. I didn't mention Elias. I didn't mention the letter. I let them sit with the truth, raw and undeniable. I wasn't the invisible one they thought I was. Dinner ended with silence. Plates sat untouched. The balance in that room had shifted, and we all felt it. For the first time, I wasn't just the quiet shadow in the corner. I was holding something they couldn't control. Late at night, I sat at my desk with Grandpa's journals spread out in front of me. The pages were worn, his handwriting looping across them in a way that felt both comforting and heartbreaking. At first, I thought they'd just be memories, little notes about his garden, his fishing trips, or stories from his younger days. But as I read deeper, I realized they held something much darker. One entry caught my eye. The date was about a year before he passed. Grandpa wrote about my dad, Charles, sitting him down to talk business. He described how Dad had pushed him, almost pressured him, into rewriting his will so that everything went to Tobias. Grandpa's words were filled with doubt, like he already knew he was making a mistake. Charles insists Tobias is the future, he wrote, but I fear Malaya will be left with nothing, and that troubles me. My throat tightened as I kept reading. Page after page, Grandpa questioned the decision. He admitted he'd been worn down, that Charles's voice was louder than his own judgment. He wrote about how he regretted signing the papers, how he feared I'd feel forgotten, cast aside. Then I found the entry that made me break down. It was dated just months before he died. I can't undo the will now, but I can do something else. Malaya deserves better. She has quiet strength Charles cannot see. I will set aside something just for her, something they cannot touch. That was when I understood. The secret bank box, the land, the money, it was his way of righting a wrong he couldn't undo publicly. He had known the will wasn't fair. He had known I'd be erased if he didn't act. The truth hit me like a punch. My own father had manipulated Grandpa into leaving me out, and he'd done it deliberately. He didn't just overlook me, he erased me. He had taken away my place in the family's future with his own hands. I sat there shaking, the journals open across the desk, tears blurring the ink. But the longer I stared at the pages, the more the sadness turned into something sharper. Anger. My chest burned with it. All those dinners where Dad praised Tobias, all the times he looked right past me. It wasn't just favoritism. It was calculated. It was betrayal. I closed the journals carefully, stacking them in a neat pile, but inside me nothing felt neat. My whole world had been split open. For years I had swallowed the silence, told myself to stay small, told myself maybe I just wasn't enough. But Grandpa's words told me the opposite. He saw me. He trusted me. And my father had tried to bury that truth. That night, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. I wasn't going to let them pretend I didn't matter. They had taken my place once, but I wasn't letting them take it again. I could have kept it all hidden. The land, the money, the journals, they were enough to give me peace and stability for the first time in my life. But every time I thought about what my father had done, how he had twisted Grandpa's love and erased me from the will, I felt a bitterness that wouldn't fade. Quietly enjoying what I'd been given wasn't enough. They needed to feel the sting of betrayal the way I had. So I started planning. The first step was securing the land. I hired a property lawyer, someone who could handle things discreetly, without the risk of my father or brother catching wind too soon. Sitting across from the lawyer in his office, I laid out the deed and the supporting documents Grandpa had left me. He studied them, then looked up and said with certainty, "This is yours. They can't touch it." Hearing those words felt like taking my first real breath in years. We filed the paperwork quietly, reclaiming full rights to the property in my name. From there, the lawyer helped me connect with developers interested in building something profitable on the land. Deals started forming slowly, but each step made me feel stronger, like I was finally stepping into the future my father tried to lock me out of. Meanwhile, life wasn't going so smoothly for Tobias. His big plans, the investments he bragged about, started crumbling. I heard through mutual friends that one of his deals fell apart, and the money he thought would multiply was slipping through his fingers. The golden boy was beginning to tarnish, and it didn't take long before my dad was on his back about it. At another family dinner, I overheard Charles pressuring Tobias. "You need to sell some property," he said sharply. "We can't afford for you to keep making mistakes. You're supposed to be leading this family, not dragging us down." Tobias argued back, but the desperation in his voice was obvious. The empire they thought they owned was starting to crack. Around the same time, whispers began to spread about me. People who had once looked past me noticed I was no longer struggling the way I used to. A few coworkers asked how I'd suddenly gotten ahead. A cousin mentioned hearing that I'd come into some money. I didn't confirm anything, but I didn't deny it either. Let them wonder. Let the curiosity build. At home, I kept my distance, but I could feel my father and brother's eyes on me whenever we crossed paths. They couldn't quite put their finger on it, but they sensed something had shifted. The girl they thought would always be dependent, always invisible, wasn't shrinking anymore. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. They had stripped me of my place once. Now it was my turn to show them what it felt like to be left out, powerless, and uncertain of what tomorrow might bring. It happened on a late afternoon when I least expected it. I was locking up after work when I saw my father waiting near my car. His arms were crossed, his jaw tight, and the look in his eyes told me this wasn't going to be a casual chat. "Malaya," he said sharply, stepping forward. "We need to talk." I stayed still, my keys clutched in my hand. "About what?" His voice dropped, low and angry. "Don't play games with me. I know Harold left you something. Papers. Money. Land. Whatever it is, it belongs to this family, and you're going to turn it over." For a moment, the old instinct kicked in, the urge to shrink, to avoid making waves. But then I thought of Grandpa's letter, his journals, his words reminding me of my quiet strength. And something inside me refused to bend. "You mean it belongs to you and Tobias," I said slowly. "Because when you say family, you've never met me." His face hardened. "Don't twist this. Tobias is the one carrying our name. He's the one." I cut him off before he could finish. My voice came out steady, stronger than I'd ever heard it. "I know what you did, Dad. I know you pushed Grandpa into rewriting his will. I know you made sure Tobias got everything while I was erased like I didn't matter." His eyes flickered, but he didn't deny it. Instead, his mouth tightened into a thin line. I took a step closer, my heart pounding but my words sharp. "You told me once that Tobias would take care of me. Turns out Grandpa knew better. He trusted me more than he ever trusted you." The silence between us crackled, heavy and raw. For the first time, I saw something like fear in his eyes, hidden behind his anger. Then the door slammed open, and Tobias stumbled in, looking desperate. His usual smugness was gone, replaced by panic. "Malaya," he blurted out. "Please, I need your help. I've lost almost everything. The investments, the money, it's gone. Just lend me something. Anything. You've got it, I know you do." I stared at him, the brother who had always flaunted his wins, the one Dad had put on a pedestal while I was made invisible. And now he was standing in front of me, begging. I shook my head. "No, Tobias. Not this time. Grandpa didn't trust you for a reason." His face twisted, disbelief written all over it. "You can't be serious. You're just going to let me sink." I held his gaze. "I'm serious. You both made sure I was left with nothing. Now you can find out what that feels like." The room went quiet, the air thick with shock. Dad's face burned with rage, Tobias's eyes filled with helpless fury. But I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, I was the one holding the power, and I wasn't giving it back. Malaya poured every ounce of her energy into the opportunity Grandpa had secretly placed in her hands. The hidden land became the cornerstone of her new beginning. With the help of the lawyer she had hired earlier, she invested not just in property, but in herself. She transformed the land into a small but thriving business, a community cafe and event space that quickly gained attention. People gathered there for warmth, conversation, and music. For the first time in her life, Malaya wasn't living in someone else's shadow. She was building something that carried her name, her vision, her strength. Every day she worked, she thought of Grandpa's words. "Quiet strength," he had written. Those words fueled her. Where Charles and Tobias had dismissed her, she now stood tall, proving her worth without asking for their approval. Meanwhile, word of her success spread. Her father and brother could no longer ignore the truth. Tobias had lost nearly everything to reckless spending, and Charles's influence in the community was fading. Their empire of control and pride was crumbling. The same people who once praised them now whispered about their failures, while Malaya's name was spoken with respect. One evening, there was a soft knock at Malaya's door. She opened it to see her mother, Janine, standing there. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Janine's eyes were tired, but softer than Malaya remembered. "I always knew," Janine said quietly, stepping inside. I knew your father pushed Harold. I knew he twisted things to favor Tobias. I wanted to speak up, but I was afraid. I didn't want to make things worse for you. Malaya listened, emotions stirring inside her. For so long she had thought her mother didn't care, but now she realized it was fear, not indifference, that had kept Janine silent. I'm sorry, Janine whispered, reaching for her daughter's hand. I should have protected you. But I see now, you didn't need me to. You've done what none of us believed you could. Malaya squeezed her mother's hand gently. It's not too late, Mom. We can still have something. Just us. From that day on, their relationship began to heal. Janine visited often, bringing small gifts, helping in the cafe, and finally showing the support Malaya had craved all her life. As for Charles and Tobias, they spiraled further. Their arrogance had left them unprepared for failure, and without Malaya's help, they sank deeper into debt and bitterness. They were forced to watch from the sidelines as the daughter and sister they had discarded built a life brighter than anything they had imagined for her. One quiet evening, after closing the cafe, Malaya sat alone with Grandpa's letter in her hands. She read it again, her eyes lingering on the words. This is for you, to protect you, and to remind you of your worth. Tears welled up as she whispered into the stillness. You were right, Grandpa. I was stronger than they ever thought. And for the first time, she truly believed it. Do you believe Malaya made the right choice by standing on her own, or should she have forgiven her father and brother? Share your thoughts down below. I'd really like to hear them. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and tap the notification bell so you'll always know when a new one is out.